Hello, welcome to the interview on France 24. I'm Sanam Chantier. Now, it's been dubbed the worst humanitarian crisis since World War II. According to the United Nations, more than 1 million migrants and refugees crossed into Europe in 2015 alone. 350,000 of those fleeing their homes in hope of a better life were Syrians. The previous year, one man followed their perilous journey from what he refers to as their hiding spots in Egypt across to Italy. Wolfgang Bauer, the author of Crossing the Sea with Syrians on the Exodus to Europe, joins us on France 24 to bring us a very personal perspective on their plight. Wolfgang, thank you very much for joining us here.
Pleasure.
This was no easy feat, it appears. It took you some 9 months to actually prepare ahead of the undercover journey.
Yeah, we didn't know if it's possible at all in the beginning, so we need to make sure that's not completely suicidal what we're going to do. We did a lot of research, we did a lot of interviews with refugees, and we asked them, it is thinkable to do it as a European? And they said, not as a journalist. If you go like this, that smugglers would mistrusting you. Also, we as refugees would mistrust you. So you need a story to tell, and so we needed to invent also an undercover identity in order to be accepted from both sides, the smugglers and the refugees, and that took time.
So you talk about this unique access not just to the refugees but also the smugglers. How determined would you say they are? Is this a losing battle that they're fighting?
The smugglers are satisfying and demand from a lot of people, and there's a huge amount of money in this industry. It's an industry. We have seen so many involved in this kind of business in Egypt. So I guess Europe can't win this battle against the smugglers, and in my opinion, it's a wrong battle we fight. For me, it's not the right decision to fight the smugglers, because they are not the target we should fight.
You've actually referred to Europe as this fortress against outsiders, and you have had this access and you've witnessed this firsthand. Wolfgang, what is the solution? Clearly the borders aren't working.
Yeah, the situation is out of control, and I doubt that we can get the situation back in our control, because the despair is so unbelievable of the people who are now forced to come to Europe. I think we have to distinguish between refugees running away from the war. They just want to save their lives, and those who want to make an economic career here in Europe, which is also a rightful wish, but we have to set preferences. And in my opinion, we should have offered the Syrian refugees at least the same deal we already have offered the refugees coming from Bosnia in the 90s. We almost we almost forgot about it, that we had a civil war in Europe, and a terrible one with a lot of victims, but a civil war without smugglers and without dead bodies on the borders, because the European Union invited them to come with the condition to go back to their home countries once the conflict is over. And it worked wonderful, in my opinion. 100,000 of people came to Europe, to Germany, to Austria, for example, and only 10,000 stayed. All the others left, but they left in friendship and not with hatred.
Now, sticking with Europe, you yourself are a German citizen. You've experienced and witnessed the polarization of society because of this ongoing crisis. How does that make you feel?
I know both sides. I have been often in the Syrian war, and I know how it feels to live with this incredible bombardment that people have to suffer now in the 6th year. And I know the villages and small towns in Germany, and the fears. And that's one of the reasons why I did this project for the book and for my newspaper, to make my people in Germany to understand the problems of the others better.
Now, Wolfgang, I want to talk about one photo that was taken by your colleague, Stanislav Kropa. The photo is going to come up here in a moment. Perhaps you can talk us through it.
Yeah, that was the end of our journey. We made it on the boats in the sea in Egypt, but we were arrested on a little island in front of the Egyptian coast, and later we were taken to this prison you see here on this picture in Alexandria, and we were there together with 60 refugees, and it's a makeshift detention center. There was nothing, no beds, no blankets, no any food, and more and more people came in. And this little girl you see in the center is Bisan. She is 13. She suffers seriously under diabetes, and she almost died during our journey to Europe. Now, fortunately, she is in Germany. She made it last autumn together with her family.
Wolfgang, we see photos like this and we can't help but to be reminded of that iconic photograph of Aylan Kurdi, the 3-year-old boy who was washed up on a beach in Turkey. In your experience of accompanying these refugees and seeing their plight, is there any end in sight when it comes to their sufferings, especially for the lost generation?
No, I'm quite pessimistic, because the reason why those people go is a war in Syria, and I don't see any realistic option to end this war at the moment. We could have the chance to reduce the suffering of the Syrians by implanting a no-fly zone years ago, but this option is over because of the Russians, because Russians have joined now the conflict, and I guess it will take several more years until this conflict is somehow solved. But what we can do as Europeans is to make the suffering of the refugees and more endurable, and that we prepare our societies to receive those people who will anyway come. They will come. We can't stop them to come.
Now, talking about a slightly more human, personal element, you used very vivid descriptions talking about the families screaming who were separated, the fear in their eyes. Can you tell us a little bit more about what they were feeling and experiencing during this journey, crossing the seas?
Yeah, you refer to the situation when we reached the beach finally, after weeks of being caught in some apartments, being hidden in secret places. And once we reached the beach, there was panic, chaos, and the people just run to the boats. And a lot of families were separated. For example, the family of Bisan, you just have seen here on the picture. She was on the boat with us, while the mother was still standing on the shore, waving as crazy. One of their friends promised them to carry Bisan through the current, through the waves, but in order to get a place on the boat for himself, he finally forgot about her and his promises, so he dropped this little girl, and somebody else rescued her, but they forgot about the family and the mother. And fortunately, some of them, the smugglers, returned and got also the mother on the boat. And that's a situation for sure I will never forget in my life again.
You talk about this being somewhat an experience, personal experience for you, actually, Wolfgang. Now, based on that, would you say that the lines were slightly blurring for you, and that the crossover of journalism versus activism, especially because there was a point where you attempted to help some of these refugees, is this a curse or a blessing for our profession?
I'm not an activist, but if you're together with suffering people, with refugees trying to get to Europe, and you see them suffer, it's difficult to be unbiased in this situation. I'm on the side of the people who suffer, of those children, for example. And that's not a problem for me. That's very necessary in our profession, because we still, even, when we are journalists, we are in the first line human beings. So I hope, and as a human being, you have responsibilities. So I hope too.
Now, Do you think that this responsibility needs to extend somewhat beyond Europe, which we've touched on already, and the region?
You speak about America, and yeah, sure. It would be fantastic if the Americans would also share our burden, because our burden is their burden, and a lot of problems in the regions, you know, are also rooted in American politics. And if Europe is overwhelmed by what's happening now with the refugee crisis, America will also feel the consequences. So we are all in the same boat.
Lastly, you're in France right now. Why do you think this country is not so attractive to the asylum seekers?
Because of the language. Most of the refugees somehow speak a little bit of English. Because most of the guys I know go to friends, to family members who already reached Sweden, for example, and Germany, and they feel, understandable, safer in the presence of family members. So, you know, one person is dragging the other one, and it's like a chain reaction. It's more or less by change. That so many people end up in Germany and in Sweden.
Now, on that note, sadly, we've run out of time. Thank you very much, Wolfgang Bauer, for joining us, the author of The Crossing. We have the French version here, Franchir la mer, and the book has been actually translated in 10 different languages. Thank you very much for joining us. And
thank you.
Thank you for watching the interview on France 24.